asking for a sign. We're going to go beyond asking for a sign. And we're going to talk about creating ongoing dialogue with the universe. So, asking for a sign is a super lovely way of getting reassurance and assurance from the universe. And especially when we're dealing with something that feels difficult, sometimes we want that little nudge from the universe that, yes, we're heading in the right path. But commonly, what I hear in that process is frustration. So when we're waiting for our sign, we get frustrated, which can result in forcing and all sorts of other things. So let's talk today about how to keep the channel pure when you ask for a sign from the universe, and then how to create an even stronger dialogue instead of just like the ask and wait game that we find ourselves in. So let's just talk first about how we muck up the energy when we ask for a sign. I can't tell you how many times I've like received a text or a phone call or like been on a call with a client and they are just in total frustration mode. Like, I was a teenager in the 90s, like a teenage girl in the 90s who's like, yelling at people in her household to get off the phone because she's like waiting for a phone call from her boyfriend or whatever, picking it up to make sure the connection is good. It's like our connection to the universe, similar situation. So that's kind of like the energy that we start embodying when we're waiting for a sign. And I've definitely done it too. I remember one time I asked to see like white feathers for something, and I went to the beach where I knew there would be a lot of feathers, and I got super pissed because there was no white feathers. And I quit on my sign because I was like, whatever. And then of course, a week later, flurry of, white feathers, which probably meant some bird just got murdered. But anyway, I really don't know why I chose white feathers. Now I'm much more organic about the whole process. But I share that to let you know I've been there too. So let's talk about your energy while you're between the process of asking for the sign and receiving it. And what happens is what I call like the waiting game, which instantly, instead of bending time and making it faster, it bends our antenna and disconnects us from the universe, the quantum field, and all of the things with which we need connection with to receive our sign. We get frustrated, which is a form of resistance. Our vibration gets smaller, which means it gets harder for our spirit to communicate with us. And in that frustration, we actually might be missing signs that we're receiving because we're in that energy of force. Like, it has to happen now. It has to happen today. It has to be white feathers. We suck the magic right out of the process, right? Instead of trusting in the timing of it. Which brings me to something that you can tune into while you're in the middle of this process, which is the energy that you're embodying while you're making the ask and while you're sitting in the ask after you've made it. The waiting when we get into lack, right? So this will affect your ability to see a sign, to receive a sign, if we're coming from lack or we're coming from trust. Because when we're coming from trust, we don't need to put so much control around it. Like, it has to happen this way, white feathers today at the beach, right? But if you're coming from fear, then that stuff can happen. And that's when we really muck up the energy of asking. So think of it as like just like a coin that you're like dropping into the fountain and you walk away. If you can ask for the sign and truly just leave it at that and walk away, then the chances are you're going to receive the sign in some form, right? But notice if you're like becoming the stalker or the crazy girl who's like, yelling at her family in the 90s to get off the phone because the boy might call. So just kind of notice what your energy is and know that if you're in that kind of like off balance place, that you're creating resistance and it's going to be harder to actually like receive a sign. So there's that. So then let's also talk about how to create a more powerful ongoing dialogue with the universe. I get signs all the time. If you want to call them signs, I call them communication actually, but I rarely ever anymore like ask, like formally make a request or ask, because I'm in constant dialogue with the universe. And when you're doing that, like, the universe can't just like interfere and drop information in certain ways because of free will. But when we're in regular dialogue with the universe, there's no free will violations, because it's like being on a text chain with a good girlfriend. Like, you know your girlfriend's going to respond. She just might be tied up at the second, right? So that's kind of like the ongoing communication. And that basically is like the next level of asking for a sign, because then you're not in the space of waiting. You just know that you're going to get your message when the time and the energy is right. And I can tell you that because I get woken up by them at like 2 a.m, Spirit doesn't have office hours, so it's not like Spirit sleeps. So they're available to us at all times. And so we don't need to like put all these time conditions on our asks or our communication. Instead, like trusting that we'll receive the sign when we're ready and that we're being constantly guided. As I was putting this idea together for you, I had the funniest example of this happen to me, and it happens all the time. I get communication all the time because I'm like, I'm in regular dialogue. I trust. I'm like, I'm always receiving confirmation. I'm always receiving messages, and so are you. Like, there's nothing different between me and you. So I was flying with my family, and I had an idea for a reel. I'm like getting into these reel things because you got to do it if you're on the gram. And I had this idea of showing magnetism through a banana and an egg. And instantly my PTSD from Catholic schools kicks in. And I was like, there's no way I can do that. And I was probably blushing on the plane. I don't know. Anyway, we land where we're going, and it's like out of sight, out of mind. My daughter's just finished potty training. The next day we're at lunch. We walk over to the bathroom where she has to go, and the doors to the bathrooms are bananas for the men's and eggs for the women's room, which I started cracking up to myself because I knew Spirit was communicating to me like, go for it, sister. Not that I needed their approval, but Spirit's funny. Like, the universe is funny. And when you get in a regular dialogue like that, these little funny things will happen. You'll get confirmation in the silliest ways. I've never seen a bathroom door with eggs or bananas on it. So it was definitely no coincidence, right? And that's the thing. Like, when you get to a place of trusting that you're in regular and consistent communication with the universe, doing your part and remaining open to receiving, you have little moments like that feel like gifts. There's like a level of ease and joy to them, and like a deeper level of feeling tapped in to the power within you and the power outside of you, connected. So play with it and see what that looks like to you. And also notice how you respond if you're not getting the communication that you want, or you're not getting the sign that you want, because that's also a communication or a sign, right? So just kind of notice as you play with this where you're at. Are you in fear, or are you in trust? Are you in constant and regular communication, or are you playing the asking and waiting game? And let me know how this transforms your relationship with getting assurance and messages from the universe.